Welcome to the CHCH Newsmakers Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Zamperin. If it's making news in Hamilton, Halton, and Niagara, across Canada or around the world, you'll find it here on Newsmakers. Canadians have a lot on their minds these days, from American tariffs to geopolitical tensions, housing, taxes, and a whole lot more. Joining us today to talk about these and much more is Niagara South Conservative MP Fred Davies. Fred, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here, Rick.
And from what I understand, this is your first ever podcast.
It is indeed, yes.
I feel honored. I feel privileged. Thank you so much.
Glad to be here.
Let's start with, and we're going to get into your first few months in Parliament Hill and maybe some of the big issues that Niagara residents are concerned about. There are, I kind of referenced it, geopolitical concerns out there. Greenland seems to be the flavor of the month for President of the United States, Donald Trump. What do you make of this whole thing?
Look, you wake up every morning and you never know what direction the world is going in. Even today, everybody's at Davies, and I'm waiting to see what Donald Trump, what rabbit he pulls out of a hat in his speech there. I suspect he'll do something disruptive, which is sort of in keeping his modus operandi, and nothing surprises me anymore. So I think we have to stop overreacting and start being more strategic about what we want for Canada and Canada's future.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, which I know is on the other side of the aisle in the House of Commons, where you sit. How do you think he's handled this whole situation?
You mean with Trump?
Yeah. Well, with Trump and Greenland in specific.
Well, look, I think Canada needs to stand up for its own sovereignty. One of the big issues, one of the extended issues from this issue with Greenland is what we do in our own north, and Canada has to start to step up to protect our own interests in the north, and that includes perhaps collaborating with Denmark and Greenland. But we have to stand up for our own best interests in this country. We can't be pushed around. As I said, we never know from one day to the next what's going to happen south of the border. So we need to start looking more strategically at our own economic and sovereignty issues. We need to protect Canada's sovereignty, and that means making some serious investments in the north.
There is a delicate balance too, because there are many key issues in this country, from homelessness to the price of food to the cost of housing to taxes, and yet, and I understand the importance of solidifying security in the north. It is a delicate balance. How do you deal with that?
I mean, these other issues, they're ongoing issues. Mm-hmm. I mean, look, in Niagara South, from the campaign right to now, I think the predominant issue, at one point, people are concerned about north-south relations with Canada and the United States, but I think affordability, housing, and some security issues along the lakeshore in this riding is uppermost in the minds of my constituents. But affordability is still the number one issue. Yeah. People are hurting. And with the new inflation rates that came out yesterday for 2025, shows that while some are within a range, the cost of food is still astronomically high, and it's not going to come down anytime soon. So those are still pocketbook issues that I see and hear about every day.
I want to dive into that in just a couple of minutes, but one more on the tensions, if you will, the U.S.-Canada relations. What are you hearing from Niagara South residents? Are they angry? Are they concerned? Is there anxiousness? What are they feeling?
I'm not sure that there's any higher degree of concern or distress in Niagara South than there is in other ridings, particularly in Niagara. Look, we're a border community. We have some issues that we need to deal with, and some pet projects of mine that actually relate to Canadian security and border security. For example, I'll give you one example. We have this scanning equipment that's been sitting at the Peace Bridge for about 2 years now. Every U.S. border crossing has sophisticated scanning equipment that can instantaneously scan commercial vehicles and all vehicles that are crossing the border. It can determine what's in the containers. So the Canadian government, through the Peace Bridge, put in $5 million. Transport Canada put in $5 million. And the U.S. government gave us $30 million to build and deploy this scanning equipment at the Peace Bridge. It's being held up in the bureaucracy now for going on 2 years. This thing is done. It's turnkey. It's ready to go. The equipment is sitting in a warehouse in Baltimore somewhere, and we're at risk of losing it if we don't get this deployed soon. But the interesting thing about this technology, and again, this is in Fort Erie at the Peace Bridge, the sooner we get this proof of concept which has been proven all around the world. This could be deployed in the Port of Montreal, the Port of Vancouver, the Port of Halifax. It can instantaneously determine what's in vehicles, including in containers, including stolen vehicles, which is at epidemic levels in this country. We haven't used this technology, but it's off the shelf. We could do this right now and put an immediate dent, if not a complete stop to the export of stolen Canadian vehicles.
So the investment has been made, but the execution is lacking. So what's the holdup?
The Canadian Nuclear Regulatory Authority is analyzing the gamma rays that are used to X-ray these containers. Interestingly, the research shows that it's actually less invasive than a regular hospital X-ray. But they still, for whatever reason, this has been deployed all over the world, except in Canada. The American Nuclear Safety Regulatory Body has approved it across the board. But for whatever reason, we just can't simply get that over the finish line. It's a bit of bureaucratic red tape. This technology is ready to go, but we just got to get that last push. And, the bureaucracy needs to just move a little faster, which is part of our whole national problem of being over-regulated and over-governed.
With heightened border security on the agenda, with in large part thanks to the President of the United States, chastising Canada, if you will, about the flow of fentanyl, even though the stats prove otherwise. Do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? Is there going to be movement on this project?
Yes. My understanding is that some representatives of the Nuclear Authority and the Peace Bridge and CBSA took a trip south into the New Mexico area to take a look at how this technology has been used. The interesting thing is it took them 2 years to do this, and the project had already been approved by the federal government. So it's a question. This was done during the Trudeau era, but it's a question of the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing. We put a whole bunch of money into a project that we knew was going to have an enormous positive impact on export of stolen goods and just analysis of stuff that's leaving the country. It boggles my mind as to why this hasn't happened.
You mentioned affordability on the minds of really every Canadian, whether it's housing or food prices or whatnot, taxes. You can throw that into the mix too. Is there a solution? Is there a magic bullet out there to solve this crisis, for lack of a better term?
Well, let's segregate that question into two sections. One is housing affordability and just basic living costs. On the housing side, our party has been very clear that we would like to eliminate the HST on all new housing. The current government wants to eliminate it on houses under 1.5 million, but I don't know any first-time home, and they have to be first-time home buyers. Yeah. I've yet to meet anybody who can afford a $1.5 million
I certainly could
home. I'm a boomer, so I couldn't do it today, I think the impact has been negligible. But I think it's a short-sighted thing. I had a meeting yesterday with the Niagara Home Builders Association. They had some really fantastic ideas of what could be done on a national stage to start stimulating some housing, and that means eliminating the HST on all new builds, and not just for first-time home buyers. My kids were lucky; they were born in the 90s, so they got into the housing market sooner, before this crisis happened. But a couple of my kids are never going to be able to buy a house because they're just never going to be able to afford the down payment unless boomers help them out.
Right.
And
the bank I think mom that's and dad is not always there, but
but that's true.
Yeah.
So, we might want to take a look at some other issues, some other policy options, like a policy that the Harper government had, which was a renovation tax credit. The Niagara Home Builders Association suggested this too, and I think if we put this forward, there needs to be some incentive to provide people an opportunity to invest in their own real estate, their own homes. But right now, until prices start to come down, which creates another problem of people with existing mortgages.
Right.
There's going to be 2 million mortgages come due in 2026, and they're coming due at a higher rate. These are people that had locked in 5 years ago at about 2%.
Right.
For every 1% of $100,000 adds at least a $500 additional mortgage payment. We're going to see a massive change in the market in 2026 as these mortgages come due and people can't afford them. So I think you're going to see prices come down simply because the supply is going to increase and people can't afford to keep these homes.
We've seen so many different measures just on the housing front alone, whether it's, allowing or promoting more multi-unit homes, secondary suites on lots, rejigging, some of the funds that first-time home buyers or regular home buyers can tap into. Nothing seems to have moved the needle enough to bring those prices down or make things more affordable. Why do you think, cutting the HST is going to be, very helpful?
Well, look, the Prime Minister and the government in the last budget introduced another layer of bureaucracy with this housing agency. People want 3-bedroom, 2 baths, ground level. Whether it's an entry-level house, whether it's a small house, but 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a ground level. This isn't what's on the table. The Prime Minister's been talking about modular houses. People can't raise kids in high-rise condos or apartments. People want to have a house in a neighborhood that's safe. They don't want to raise their kids in a big urban setting, and to me that's where the federal government's putting most of its emphasis is high density, big builds. But that's not what people want. The federal government has an opportunity to strategically release lands and encourage municipalities to extend urban service boundaries where people. And then the builders, the government doesn't build houses.
Right.
Builders build houses.
That's the policy, right.
And in this environment, builders need to make money. They're not going to build under market value. And the government needs to find a solution to this housing market. And to me, that means expanding urban service boundaries, dealing with development charges, providing incentives like the HST forgiveness, a home renovation tax credit, other things like that. But people have to understand, governments don't build, they don't stick frame. Right. They never have. I think the feds have looked at the wrong, put a lot of money into incentivizing municipalities, and housing starts are actually going down. So, we can spend billions of dollars throwing money at municipalities, but that's not the answer.
Yeah, the provincial government here in Ontario has also kind of fallen short of its, housing goals or building goals. And you mentioned the home builders. That return on investment has to be there. There's currently many across the province who are sitting on land because they're not going to see that ROI, so they're not going to invest in that land. You mentioned expanding urban boundaries. Is it at the sacrifice of farmland? Do we want to see that? Are you okay with that?
Well, look, I'll give you an example. In Port Colborne, we've got a lot of what's called deferred residential or residential development. I'm not sure what the current code is, but there's hundreds and hundreds of acres that are sitting in that deferred residential zone. By expanding the urban service boundary, it gives people an opportunity to buy land, perhaps at the biggest cost right now for development is the land cost, right. The per lot servicing cost. Before you even put a shovel in the ground, you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars, if not over $100,000 before you even get a building permit. So by expanding the urban service boundary and increasing the capacity or the inventory of land, you're giving developers an opportunity to create some new opportunities. But it's going to take a generation to fix this. Yeah. Politicians have to stop saying that they've got the quick fix for this, or that we're going to fix this. I'm bothered by this, building faster than we ever have in a generation. That doesn't happen unless all cylinders are firing in the economy, and that means developers have to have a reason and an opportunity to build. And right now, it's not happening because the housing market is stalled.
Yeah, part of that too is the skilled labor force. We don't have what we used to have, right?
Well, if you talk to the Niagara Building Association, they've been laying off trade workers or skilled workers in the housing sector like crazy. 60% of one builder in Niagara has laid off 60% of their framers because there's no work. People aren't buying. People are sitting on the sideline. There's still some confusion at the federal level. People are thinking, well, I'm going to wait to buy because they're going to do something more. Or I'm going to wait to buy because the prices are going to come down. And what that has also stalled is people in my generation, the older Canadians, are saying, I'm not going to sell yet because I have no idea what it's going to cost me to go to downsize. So the entire market is kind of stifled right now, and we're in this sort of building purgatory. we've got to get out of that, and that means lower interest rates, greater incentive, like getting rid of the HST on building, and getting rid of the HST on all new home purchases.
Part of the uncertainty, not only for people who are buying and selling homes or upsizing or downsizing, is the whole American tariff situation, right? That is the buzzword has been uncertainty from business aspect as well.
Yes.
And this is just another wrinkle that Canadians are dealing with.
Yeah, again, that the whole tariff situation is dependent on the mood of a certain individual that sits in the White House. And, I'm waiting for another shoe to drop over Greenland.
Right.
So we'll see. I don't, like we have, one of the things that Canada was built on an east-west railroad. If Canada is going to compete in the next century and beyond, we need to ensure that we've got a national manufacturing strategy, which we don't have right now. We need to build a pipeline from east to west. We need to get our oil to other markets, and that means building a pipeline through British Columbia. Right now, the oil that we actually that we bring across the country, interestingly, goes through the United States before it comes back into Ontario. If the United States, on a whim, wanted to cut that off, we would freeze in the dark. And we need to rectify that. We have the third largest oil deposits in the world. We can bring it to market with the cleanest technology in the world as well. And we get conservatives get criticized when we talk about the export of LNG to China. China is opening up a new coal-fired plant every 2 weeks. Canadian LNG is the cleanest in the world, and we've got regulations in place that ensure that if we want to lower emissions in the world, the best thing we can do is give the world Canada's LNG.
We've been slow to do so, though.
We have been slow. Well, Justin Trudeau said there was no business case. Yeah. Well, the Germans say there is. Europe says there is. They want to get off of Russian oil and Russian LNG. Canada can do this. The Americans are springboarding miles ahead of us by building LNG export facilities in the Gulf Coast. We've lost so many opportunities, and I'm not sure that this government, with an MOU that is meaningless, it's got more holes in it than Swiss cheese and more caveats than we've ever seen in any document. It appeased two constituencies for a short while. But that MOU is meaningless, and I'd rather see some action. We want to see some pipelines in the ground, and I don't think it's going to happen under this government.
You mentioned China, and because of the uncertainty with our trading relationship with the States, Prime Minister Carney has reached out to China to say, hey, well, you reduce tariffs on things like canola, and we'll accept 49,000 Chinese EVs. Ontario Premier Doug Ford doesn't like it, certainly because of the auto manufacturing sector in this province and the jobs tied to that. What do you think of this whole situation?
It's interesting because Mark Carney said that the biggest threat to Canadian sovereignty was China. A few short months ago, China was his main concern for Canadian security and sovereignty, and now it's not an issue. Interestingly, one of your competitors conveniently left out a clip when he made reference to the New World Order, talking about the relationship of Canada and the United States. That scares me. But let's be real about that. The 49,000 is just year one. It's escalating over 5 years. Mr. Carney came back with a 1-year deal for canola and the fishers, the export of fishing products from the East Coast. That's 1 year, but the Chinese got a 5-year deal. What happens in 1 year when China decides it needs to leverage its position more in Canada by saying, well, we need more than what you gave us, so the tariffs are going back on canola. We've learned over decades that China can't be trusted, and I don't trust it now. The other thing is, as Mr. Carney says, this is only 2 or 3% of the EV market. It's actually 36% of the electric. Sorry, he said it's only 2 or 3% of the vehicle market, or the new car sales. It's actually, I think, 36% of the EV market in Canada, which is shrinking because we don't have enough infrastructure. We've dug ourselves into this big hole, and Mr. Carney continues to dig deeper by we still have the EV mandate in place. There still is the 2030 target of no more combustion engines being built in Ontario, but we don't have the infrastructure to service and support an EV market. We are spinning our wheels and looking at knee-jerk, short-term reactionary policies that doesn't deal with our fundamental problems of a lack of a national industrial policy.
Premier Ford also doubts that a Chinese manufacturing plant will be constructed on Ontario. I'm sure you share those doubts as well.
Never going to happen.
Yeah.
When was the last time the Chinese built a serious manufacturing plant in Canada?
Never.
Yeah.
Let's get to year one in the House of Commons for you. What was the first moment like when you're stepping into Parliament Hill?
Well, let me preface it by saying I'd been in business in Niagara for about 40 years. So landing in the House of Commons, has always been on the radar screen for me through my life. I started my career in the House of Commons in 1979 when Joe Clark was Prime Minister. And I stayed through Pierre Trudeau's second mandate. And I stayed through the Mulroney years. So coming back to Niagara, it was always sort of on the radar screen, but the opportunity was never there. I was busy building a business. But I met Pierre Poilievre when he came to Port Colborne a couple of years ago, and we had a nice chat. And it was then I said, this is the message that Canadians need to hear. And I was lucky enough to win the riding back after 37 years. But setting foot in the House of Commons is a pretty humbling experience. I'm, eternally grateful to the people that sent me there. But that place is an amazing institution, and I'm just proud to be there.
Steeped in history, and you're stepping in there as an elected official. You're representing constituents. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. We've had some interesting first months. I've been sitting on a couple of committees that I didn't expect to sit on. I'd hoped to get on the industry committee or the finance committee, which was in keeping with my background. But I got on international human rights, which is a subcommittee of foreign affairs.
Has that been an eye-opener?
It really was. And It's been a very interesting experience. And I'm also on citizenship and immigration. Now, that has some relevance to the riding, given the amount of refugees that are coming in and the issues we had in Niagara Falls. But it's been a fascinating learning experience. And while being a new MP means sometimes it starts off slowly, I can see the momentum starting now. I'm getting involved in a lot of local issues, not the least of which is a very important issue of making changes to the criminal code for violent repeat child sex offenders.
Right, and we've seen an incident in Welland that certainly is well publicized. What changes do you hope will occur?
Well, look, I have to pay tribute to the ladies that I meet with them on Saturday mornings in my constituency office. We have coffee and we talk about, these are all survivors of sexual assault and child sexual abuse, or know people that have been abused. I had, I think, 12 in my office this past Saturday. And we have made some progress. I presented a petition with about 15,000 signatures demanding the federal government change the criminal code to deny bail to repeat child sex offenders. Daniel Senecal is the guy that brutally assaulted this 3-year-old toddler in Welland, and that was sort of my trial by fire going to Ottawa. It has been an incredible experience, but it's been so sad. I asked Mr. Poilievre, I talked to him, I gave him a call and I said, this is what's happened in my community, and I've got a group of people that want to make some changes, and we need to make some changes in the criminal code. We're not kidding when we say we've got to stop, we've got to have jail and not bail. There is still a provision in the criminal code that requires judges to release offenders at the earliest moment and the least onerous conditions. People like Daniel Senecal, to me, shouldn't see the light of day again. What he did to that 3-year-old girl is inhumane. And there's other things happening. There's a repeat offender in Port Colborne that was rearrested and still has not been given bail for historic offenses on children. But Mr. Poilievre said to me, whatever you need, Fred, you can stand up in the House of Commons as long as you want to get this message across. And I think we were successful. We did see some legislation introduced. It doesn't go far enough. The ladies from Niagara, we're planning an event in Ottawa on May the 27th, and we're going to be inviting some key politicians to listen to their stories. Politicians need to hear firsthand from these survivors on what they've gone through and what it means to live their lives with perpetrators that are still walking the streets. still walking the streets knowing that they're dangerous offenders.
How is the community of Welland recovering? This is a heinous incident, well publicized, many people impacted. How are things going?
Well, I think it's a slow process. Luckily, these ladies have managed to speak to every municipal council in Niagara and have had a motion passed by all of them asking both the provincial government and the federal government to make changes to the way bail is treated in Ontario. I think it's still a very real issue in Welland. Everywhere I go, people talk about it, and I'm really just a voice for them, and I am so grateful for these ladies. They continue to give me inspiration, and that's the best thing an MP could ever have is constituents. Instead of the yelling and screaming that happen often to politicians, I've been so blessed by having the support of so many people as we move this issue forward.
Yeah,
in
being
Ottawa.
engaged in the process. Yeah. Back to your number one for you in Parliament Hill. Have you had a pinch me moment of, wow, I can't believe I'm here doing this? It was the Speech from the Throne. I had not planned to go to the Senate to watch the Speech from the Throne because it was a really hot day, and excuse me, it was a really hot day, and the lineup was huge, and I was in the lobby of the opposition lobby, and our coordinator said, "Fred, you want to see the King?" I said, well, I hadn't planned to. He says, you're first in line. We got three seats left on the bus. Right.
You're first in the bus if you want to go now.
Yeah.
I said, sure.
When's the next time you're going to do this?
Yeah.
Right?
So I got on the bus, and as I walked into the Senate chamber, I was literally behind the Speaker of the House.
Wow.
And got a front row seat to hear the Speech from the Throne. And that was sort of like, wow. I can't believe that just happened to me.
What are things like in the House of Commons? We see the rockiness. We see, the yelling.
Thank you.
And going back and forth. Is it? At times it seems pretty chaotic, but you're there for hours on end. We're only, watching a little snippet or a little clip. What is it like in there?
Look, the thing that people are bothered by the rambunctiousness of the House of Commons from time to time.
It's a good word.
But I would caution people to not be too critical of it. This is a parliamentary democracy. This is a tradition of being in Parliament where the opposition holds the government to account. There's very few places in the world where that is allowed to happen. And while people may get annoyed, it does hold the government to account. And if you think of the opposite of that, I don't think people would agree that would be a better way to operate in this country. Parliament is an interesting institution, and while it does have some difficulties from time to time on decorum, ultimately MPs do respect each other. I've come to know many people on the opposition side. I work with them well in committee, including the Bloc Québécois. So I'm not bothered by it. I understand why people can be bothered by it, but just think about what the alternative is. If we didn't have an official opposition, a loyal opposition, holding a government to account, it's part of our tradition. Sometimes it gets a little out of hand, but ultimately the job gets done.
Yeah. What's your seat like in the House of Commons? Are you in the bleacher seats?
No,
or nosebleeds?
I'm a backbencher for sure, but
Yeah.
I'm right in the middle. I'm right behind the leader, and I get the full view of the House of Commons. And I've been fortunate to have been able to make some contributions to debate over the first 8 months, including mostly on legislation and security.
And what were you like in that moment? What are some nerves, some butterflies?
Yeah, it's interesting. My maiden speech was like the first week and a half of the House, and I was deathly ill.
Oh no!
I had such a bad cold, and my voice was going away, and I asked, "Can I defer this?" And they said, "Push through it," and I did. But by the end of my speech, I thought I was going to fall over. But it got better. It gets better over time.
Yeah.
There are butterflies when you stand up in that House. It's a very imposing, intimidating place. People with dedicated Canadians. To be a member, there are more Canadians in the NHL than there are members of Parliament.
Wow.
So when you think about how hard it is to get into the NHL,
Yeah.
it's not an easy road to get to the House of Commons, but and that sort of perspective is more humbling because the time there is precarious for sure. We are not there for a long time, but I'm hopeful that over the course of this Parliament that we can get some more things done. Look, we've got a big convention coming up in a week or two, and I think that will set the tone for the fall or for the spring session.
Was there a moment in Parliament where you thought, "Wow, I didn't expect this," or "I didn't, this was a surprise"? And maybe not in front of other MPs, but maybe behind the scenes, where you thought, "Wow, I didn't know I had to do this," or "I didn't know this was the rule," or whatever the case was.
No, I had been there before, as I said. I started my career there, so there wasn't a lot of surprises in the way the process works. It is very, very scripted, and nothing happens by accident in the House of Commons, either on the government side or the opposition side. Everything is well managed. We know what our job is. There's a lot of input. To go to a committee meeting, for example, for a 2-hour committee meeting, there's probably a 4-hour prep time.
Wow.
We need to know. We need to study the witnesses. We need to know their backgrounds. We need to be able to point to areas of legislation that we need to review, and we have to have our questions ready. So it's very deliberate, and it's a very deliberate process. And if that was a bit of a surprise, I think the amount of research and time that goes into short periods of legislative activity.
So now that you're back in the House on January 26th, is it a sigh of relief when you're not in the House because it's not as intense, or is it maybe more intense, being in the constituency and working with stakeholders, or is it just two different? We're talking apples and oranges.
They're two different animals, but the number of active hours in a day doesn't change.
Okay.
I typically get up around 6 in the morning in Ottawa, do some morning work, and then get to the office because. Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday are committee days, and then Wednesday is prep days, and it's also caucus day. So there's not a lot of office time. I spend very little time in my office in Ottawa. Most of it is legislative responsibilities. In the constituency, I'm spending most of my weekends meeting constituents in the office. So my wife is a little concerned that we don't get as much time together, but luckily I only live about 5 minutes away from the constituency office.
Right. In the House of Commons, we've seen some Conservative MPs defect or cross the floor into the Liberals. What's that done to the party? Was it a morale, gut punch, or how would you describe it?
I would say they were very singularly isolated incidents. Excuse me. Michael Maw and I sat on the Immigration Committee. I sat next to him for 8 months on that committee. I talked to him every day. He sat behind me in the House, talked to him in the House every day. He came to the Conservative Christmas party on the Wednesday night, the day before he crossed the floor, and I'm convinced that he had not made a decision that evening.
Wow.
Something happened. He represents a very interesting riding that has had a lot of accusations of Chinese interference. I think it was. There was more to the story. Interestingly, he ended up on the trip to China with the Prime Minister. I'm not sure if that was a reward.
Right.
But Michael Maw didn't join the Liberals because he's suddenly a Liberal. And Mr. Doutremont told me the day before he crossed the floor that if an election were held, he would lose. So I think in both cases it was specific self-interest, nothing to do with passing judgment on our leader, who I think has led the caucus incredibly well since the election and will continue to lead the caucus.
So you don't think come convention time that these will be this issue will be a big sticking point for delegates to say, oh, you know what, we need a change?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No. Mr. Poilievre commands the loyalty and respect of everybody in that caucus.
What do you like about your leader? Because there's a lot of people that hated Justin Trudeau and still do hate the former Prime Minister, and there's a lot of people that hate Pierre Poilievre. What do you see a reasoning for it?
No, I don't actually. But I think, look, if you look at the last election, my boomer generation abandoned the Conservative Party, which has been part of our traditional support. And I understand Mr. Poilievre. Mr. Carney sort of represented that boomer generation. Mr. Poilievre is more of a disruptor. He recognized that there are fundamental changes that needed to happen at the federal level. Carney wasn't advocating that. So I think people chose stability without recognizing the implications of that level of stability of the government spending out of control. But Mr. Carney has been very good at co-opting. The majority of his policies have been ours. So if anyone has got any criticism of Mr. Poilievre, just take a look at the Prime Minister's policy agenda right now. Virtually everything we've been talking about over the last 5 or 6 years. Mr. Poilievre, in my view, is one of the most deliberate, insightful individuals I've ever met as a leader. And I've met all of the Conservative leaders since Robert Stanfield. That shows you how old I am. But
I guess the tact is much different than we've seen.
It may be,
right?
But every leader has his own style, his or her own style. Mr. Poilievre is, when they say that he's sort of Trump light, he's the antithesis of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a knee-jerk reactionary whose narcissism defines his personality. Mr. Poilievre is a serious policy wonk, if I can use that term. He doesn't do or say anything that has not been deliberately researched and understood for its implications and what it means to the Canadian people. He doesn't speak off the cuff or make silly remarks or have knee-jerk reactions. Canadians will be well served by giving this man a chance to show that while some may criticize him as a career politician, he has been around the block. He earned every one of those elections, has sat in the House of Commons, knows the machinery of government, has been a critic and has been involved in a minister, knows how things are done, as opposed to somebody coming in that has no parliamentary experience. The dichotomy between the two it couldn't be more stark. And I am grateful to have him as my leader, and we have a bench strength of people from across the country that can do an enormously wonderful things for Canada in portfolios should we win the next election.
Let's circle back to Niagara South. What are some of the goals you have for the region?
Well, I want to get involved more in transport issues. As you know, the St. Lawrence Seaway literally bisects my riding from Thorold, Welland, and Port Colborne. One of the issues that I have been trying to quietly behind the scenes get involved with, which I'm going to get more vocal about this. We need to start to invest some money in some of the wharves in Port Colborne on the east side and the west side. We've had 3 wharves on the west side of Port Colborne that have been out of commission now for 20 years. I've had a meeting with the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation, as it's now termed, and they agree that it's in their interest to invest to make sure that all their capital assets are operating at full capacity. Well, this is a huge opportunity for Port Colborne to fix broken infrastructure that will provide opportunities for economic development. Short sea shipping containers being one of them, which is from the Port of Hamilton all the way through to Lake Erie. These are opportunities that the shipping companies are taking a look at. Transport Canada has lands along the Welland Canal in Thorold and in Welland that need to be freed up for development, industrial development. This is low-hanging fruit. So I want to focus some of the attention over the next year or so in those economic development opportunities along the St. Lawrence corridor.
So this would boost the economy, create jobs, obviously.
Absolutely.
It'd be a win-win situation.
Yeah.
So do you have a goal line in mind in terms of getting something done?
Well, I'd like to get a commitment for these projects by the end of 2026. It's not rocket science. These are projects that have been on the books for years. In fact, Transport Canada committed $20 million to fixing the west side wharves in Port Colborne 3 years ago. And nothing's happened because they want to have another $20 million partner to invest in that, which may be called P3, a public-private partnership. I'm not certain that that's going to happen in this current economic environment where we're dealing with a precarity in our Canada-U.S. trade relations. The Prime Minister is really serious about national projects. This is a national project.
Right.
This is already on the books. You don't need to go through a national projects approval process. This is already there waiting to go. $20 million is going to provide an opportunity for all of the shipping companies and industry to start creating new jobs and building wealth along the St. Lawrence corridor. Easy peasy stuff.
Do you have a guesstimate on a potential economic impact for something like this? Are we talking billions of dollars?
Ultimately, yeah. We're talking about billions of dollars through the whole transportation supply chain.
Right.
I'll give you another example, and this is what an industry expert said to me a few months ago. If we can't bring oil across the country, we can bring a pipeline to Thunder Bay, and we can transform the St. Lawrence Seaway into a corridor for shipping oil to the East Coast and to Tidewater. That's going to take a very unique and creative mindset, but it's worth looking at. That's a national project.
Yeah.
We've heard that Quebec won't allow a pipeline through the province. Well, then let's work around that. We need to get Western Canadian oil to Tidewater in the East Coast. This is a way to do it, and it would create enormous opportunities in the St. Lawrence Seaway.
Lastly, what are you looking most forward to when you're back in the House of Commons in a week's time or so?
That's, I can't really tell you because the agenda hasn't really been set yet. As the opposition member, we don't set the agenda.
Right.
We know that there's interesting pieces of legislation that need to come forward. The budget still hasn't really passed in a lot of the enabling legislation, so we don't really know yet what the government has in mind. This has been the least number of pieces of legislation that's been passed in a session of Parliament in the last 30 years. So we'll see what Mr. Carney has on the plate for us, but looking forward to digging into committee, getting involved in some of the issues we talked about, and continue to represent the concerns of my constituents, particularly with the criminal justice system.
Good luck with all those, and that's a lot of items on the agenda. Best of luck, and I know Niagara South residents, many of them are cheering you on.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. And that is a wrap for the Newsmakers. You can tip your cap, as I always do. Big thank you to the All-Star cast behind the scenes. They do a phenomenal job. If you like today's episode, click the thumbs up, hit subscribe, leave a comment as well. Catch the Newsmakers podcast on chch.com/podcasts and wherever you get your favorite podcasts.